Unique, I don't know how to describe it. Unique property of having to move your eye across a page. Now this is also done in painting, in singular panel, in singular image illustration. Unfortunately, comics, you also have to feed them to the next page. So this is where the term sequentiality comes from. And you often hear that referred to in comics. They are sequential printed. This is by a Belgian artist named Herman Uppen. And this is a story he does that's set in the Middle Ages. Very grim, very realistic. No fairies, no elves, no wizards. But how life in the Middle Ages most certainly would have been. Again, for people that love to draw. Ian Pollock is a very popular commercial illustrator in the States. He used to work for Rolling Stone doing the illustrations for their record review page. He took a whole year out to do this adaptation of King Lear. If you ever read King Lear, you realize that all the characters are twisted beyond belief.
Yeah.
So here's the character page. Who is male and who is female? In Japan, comics are an immense market. I read an analogy once that pointed out that Japan puts more paper towards comic book production than they do towards toilet paper. Makes you want to visit Japan. Japan also has a very large section of their comic market that appeals to females. Unfortunately, in America, we're still fairly male-oriented. That changes day to day. And additionally, in Japan, baseball comics are big. And golf comics are big. Don't know how exciting those can be, but if you've ever seen Japanese storytelling, it's extraordinarily dynamic. These often come in volumes, sometimes 400 to 500 pages thick. The storytelling is so clear, so deliberate, that you don't even need to know Japanese. It feeds you right through. This is a comic that's been mainly responsible for the increase in female readership in America. This is done by a pair of brothers that live in California named the Hernandez brothers. The name of the series is Love and Rockets. And as with most comics in both Europe, Japan, and America, the story is generally serialized first in periodical form, segment by segment, and then later collected together into an album. In this case, referred to as a graphic novel. As I said, the book's called Love and Rockets. And with that title, it's got a heavy dose of romance, and the occasional rocket. It's done by two brothers, divided in half. Each issue is divided in half. The stories tend to deal, originally were a little more fantastic, and now they tend to deal with slice-of-life Americana in small, rural California towns. This is covered by the other brother, Gilbert Hernandez, and a piece from his town. Act of Contrition. Raw Magazine has been on, for the last 5 or 6 years, on the real cutting edge of comics. It's produced out of New York, and it takes very seriously its commitment to the avant-garde. As you can see, read yourself Raw. This is a cover to one, the subtitle being The Graphic Aspirin of War Fever. These guys have pretty much decided to leave behind the considerations of storyline for the most part. Concentrate almost entirely on visual impact, emotional impact. They're not so concerned with linear storytelling, but with bringing almost a fine art sensibility to what has been an illustration-dominated field. Another cover, Open Wounds from the Cutting Edge of Comics. Raw is put together by a husband and wife team, and edited by a husband and wife team, Art Spiegelman and Françoise Moulin. It's a favorite strip of mine from Raw. This is done by a fellow named Jerry Moriarty, and they're post-World War II tales about, autobiographical tales about his father. The title of the strip is Jack Survives. The first panel says, "Insurance, Jack? Cup of coffee? There's no God. I thought not. You need more insurance." He's a damn intellectual. Art Spiegelman, within the pages of Raw, Art Spiegelman also does a serialized story called Mouse. This has done a lot for advancing the perception of comics in America. It's an autobiographical tale of Art Spiegelman himself interviewing his father, who's an Auschwitz survivor. It's done in an animal allegory. All the Jews are mice, the Nazis are cats, as you see Hitler back there. This is really a tremendous, tremendous piece of work. Not only do we learn a first-hand historical account of what life in concentration camps was like, but we see what effect this had on the next generation. We see what, how Art Spiegelman has turned out as a result of his father, and also a lot of their relationship is explored, and it's really fascinating. He does these very small. This is a chapter heading. I think he does a reproduction size, which is only about 6 inches by 8 inches in this case. Very graphic. Sue Coe is a popular political illustrator. After the success of collecting Mouse into a small graphic novel, Raw was encouraged to try their hand at some other unusual projects. This is a biography she did of the civil rights activist Malcolm X, done in a collage style. Recently, I don't know if any of you remember from when you were young, when you went to the supermarket checkout counters, there was always Classics Illustrated comics at the checkout counter. And recently, a publisher named First Comics has revived this, and they've really gotten some of the top talent in the field to adapt some of the classics into comic form. This is Gon Wilson. He's a very famous satirical illustrator, cartoonist. Does work in Playboy, The New Yorker, and here he's doing Poe and other poems, or The Raven and other poems by Poe. And the second one is another very popular strip cartoonist named Rick Geary doing Great Expectations. This is really, I think, a very good project for exposing comics to the world that isn't exposed to comics, and also for attracting artists that might not necessarily have considered comics before to comics. Everybody has a favorite classic they've read or have been forced to read. And as you can see, the style of these projects varies greatly from one to the other. This is Through the Looking Glass by a young fellow named Kyle Baker. And the last one of the first 4 they've released is Moby Dick by Bill Sienkiewicz. And Bill's a very popular talent in the field right now. He's brought a lot of current illustration methods to comics. This is a page from the book. This is Ahab when he first sights the white whale. And this is the whale as he first approaches the boat. Fuzzy effect really works on this one. Again, Bill Sienkiewicz from another project he's done called Electra Assassin. He works in a full painted style, and it's amazing to me that he can produce this page after page after page with seemingly no problems. And quickly, it's fast. That's a problem in comics. Mr. X is a very popular character amongst a lot of the counterculture. Lives in a city that is the city's city. And Mr. X is a very twisted, drug-influenced character. This is a cover featuring Mr. X from a British anthology called A1, utilizing three-dimensional sculpture in comics. Here again, it's really unlimited medium. It's only open to your imagination. And I think that's the key thing that binds all these people together that do comics, because they really seem to be a diverse group. It's imagination. This is my favorite pieces from Raw. Comics is a medium for self-expression? Oh, John, you're such a fool. I'm sorry. Again, imagination is what binds all these people together. A rampant imagination. This is a piece of mine from my student days. And inevitably, when a model would pose, feathers or masks or headdress or weaponry would creep onto it somehow. And this was just to do a figure I did, Hercules. I don't know if this is common knowledge to most of the people in the audience, but I spent 2 years at James Madison University. And this was a strip I did for their paper twice a week. It was a superhero spoof. This was very good. Anybody that's interested in comics, I recommend getting involved with some form of publication early. Teaches you a lot. Teaches you about deadlines, the importance of deadlines, producing continually. I did this twice a week for 2 years, and that was in addition to all my schoolwork. And I was the graphics editor and spot illustrator. Helps you learn a lot of the mechanics of printing, too. Certain things that just the sheer physical limitations of printing won't allow you to do. When I first dropped out of school, never finished. Ooh, that's what I'd like to hear here. I just felt the school I was in, I wasn't learning anything about comics. They really pretty much turned down their noses on comics. I felt I had the basic grounding of what I needed, and plus I was involved with people that seemed to be providing me with an opportunity to get stuff published. This is, we did covers for game modules. I don't know if any of you are aware of like Dungeons & Dragons and the vast rash of role-playing games. This was a science fiction one called Battle Above the Earth. And a swashbuckling one called Flesh and Blades. Some of my first printed color work, actually. Woo! This was the beginning of my career in actual comics. And by actual comics, I mean monthly periodicals. In this case, bi-monthly periodicals. So several fellows I had met in college, and I wanted to do comics. We felt we weren't getting the opportunities we needed, or the feedback we needed, or the support and encouragement we needed. We decided to publish our own. This is often a way that a lot of people in comics get started, self-publishing. This was an anthology that was put together by the fellows I knew who dropped out of school about half a year before I did. They ended up calling themselves Kamiko. This was an anthology they did called Primer. In the second issue of Primer, I did a little 10-page story, very swashbuckling adventure type of thing. The big difference was the main character was the villain, not the hero. Little did I know how far that would go in years to come. Shortly after that one came out, they decided to branch off some characters from this anthology title into titles of their own. They said if I wanted to do one, I could have it. This was from the second issue of Grendel, the series that spun off from my little 10-page thing. When I go back and look at these now, which is almost 10 years ago, next year will be this character's 10th year anniversary, I can really cringe at my own drawing in that stage. But it did have some real interesting layout things happening. This was from the second issue. And I've since seen this done once or twice, but I had never seen it up until that point. This was a segment involving the origin of that werewolf character we just saw on the cover. It stretched over 9 pages, and the 9 pages fed around each page onto the next. You'll see this wolf face over here, this half of a wolf face. It continues over there. You turn the page. Pretty much the story wrapped around the page and flowed on for 9 pages. So it's very innovative in its layout, if rather crude in its drawing and its stories. Eventually, though, my publishers decided that the way to continuous successful publishing was to break into color. They asked me if I had any ideas for a color series, and at that point, I started developing a series called Mage. And Mage became so time-consuming that I not only fully dropped out of school, but I fully dropped Grendel all the way behind me. This was the first issue of Mage, and as we can see there, even it went through a drastic style evolution. These are covers from Mage. Mage was a 15-issue limited series, and this has since become rather commonplace in comics, but at the time was rather unknown. At the time, the only thing publishers wanted were series that could run on and on and on forever. They were dealing mainly with adolescents who needed this continual fix, couldn't take their stories in doses and realize that things have an end. As the market began to grow up, the self-contained story began to grow in popularity. Mage was a 15-issue series, the first part of a planned trilogy that I'm ultimately going to complete at the behest of many, many people. Mage also was unique in that the characters changed. They grew. They didn't remain static. We didn't have a Robin that didn't grow up over a space of 35 years. It was very autobiographical. I don't know if you notice a certain similarity with this fellow here. But this is very common amongst cartoonists. Amongst artists. Artists can only draw what's inside of themselves. Artists can only create what's inside of themselves. With cartoonists, you tend to end up drawing people looking like you. It's very common. A lot of the new wave of cartoonists draw characters that look exactly like themselves. Specifically, a fellow named Dave Stevens. There's a character named the Rocketeer, looks exactly like him. Another popular creator is a fellow named Howard Chaykin. Has probably a dozen characters that look like him. I'm keeping it to just one. But for a while, when I finished this, I couldn't draw a character with a beard. Period. People go, "Oh, you're drawing yourself." Mage involved a lot of unusual layout too. This is a 2-page spread. Mage was very whimsical, very fantastic. This is a situation wherein the character with the white hair there, who's a magician, is just escaping from an exile into an automatic teller machine, where he was locked for many years, or months. Mage is very large and dynamic. One of the first reviews I ever got complained about the fact that the sound effects looked like pop artifacts. And I said, sorry. Part of what made Mage very evolutional for me was the discovery of a relatively unique coloring technique at the time. This was known as blue lining. Once I discovered this and was given the opportunity to work with full color in this unique style, I found I really fell into my stride with Mage, and it really hit its peak. In this method, there's a black line design produced, i.e. here. It's then reproduced on whatever surface you want in a blueprint image. This shows you where to color. And as you see, I haven't colored in the areas that will be black in the final version, only wherein color is needed. The black line is then laid over top to give you the finished piece. Look at it again. It's really a wonderful process and really speeds up the production of comics. This is an example of storytelling. No words here, but if you follow from panel to panel, you can see exactly what's happening. It's a very key element of comics, to direct your eye across the page. As this character lifts, he'll go up, he walks down, he pushes under, and walks out. And color adds an entirely different dimension to it all. Again, the extras you can do with color. Particularly note the two panels at the top where he's being lured to sleep by various evil sprites. With color, you can add the musical notes. I did these slides myself, so some of them aren't quite as clear as others. Here again, color can change the entire mood of what's going on. Will change the entire mood of what's going on. Up until what I was doing, I'd always felt that color was an extremely ignored element of comics. For the most part, the reproduction methods have been so primitive that no matter what you tried to do with color, it was going to end up looking shitty. So this was really a breakthrough, not only for me personally, but for comics in general. It has since become the standard for top-selling projects. This is a scene wherein the characters are we focused? This is a scene wherein the characters are floating in what are known as the fairy realms, a land of pure color, pure magic. So the layout is unbound by any panel borders, any backgrounds, any frame of reference to any sort of reality. Again, we did something that was unusual at the time. When we first started doing Mage, we weren't getting the type of sales to necessitate doing a full color book. So we took some back issues we had in stock, had the covers ripped off, and had the guts rebound into a graphic novel. We did 2 volumes of this. And the experiment succeeded because it got us a deal with a larger publisher, actually located in Norfolk, that wanted to produce the book on, I keep pausing here because I keep waiting for the focus. They wanted to produce the book on high quality paper, they wanted to distribute it through bookstores. So rather than continue this ripping and rebinding process, we just went for a reprint and reproduced the book into a 3-volume series, which wraps up the entire first segment of what will be the trilogy, which is called The Hero Discovered. The second volume will be called The Hero Defined. After I finished Mage for a little while, we were getting some heavy response that people really couldn't wait for the second part and wanted more. So I did a small 16-page story that would kind of act as a bridge between the first and second parts of the story. I was living in Montreal at the time, so I set this story in a mythical French-speaking country. It's never identified. Specifically wanted to do a story involving a horse. This is from, what is this? The Basin of Apollo in the Palace of Versailles in France. More pages from this story. The originals are on display in the gallery down at the end of the hall, so you can see some of these after the presentation is over. The sequel will be called Mage 2, and will be out. It was promised about a year ago. I've since gotten into some larger projects that I think merit waiting to do Mage 2. Which brings us full circle back to the return of Grendel. At the time the Mage was just starting to catch on, I was getting a lot of response from people that they want to know how the story ended. I just ended in the middle of it. Kamiko asked me, is there any way for you to bring this character back? I decided to do it in a 4-page backup sequence in the rear section of each issue of Mage. With this issue, it premiered. Since I was stuck with 4 pages to tell my story in each segment of my story as opposed to 30, I had to really rework the way the story was presented. It couldn't be a typical balloon and caption and panel fashion. So it was done in a style more reminiscent actually of an illustrated story. The illustrations became these large iconographic tablets of almost like an Egyptian stele. And the copy was dropped in typesetting. Again, something that was relatively unknown in America at that time. This is one of my favorite layouts where Grendel, the main character, the bad guy, manipulates the assassination of 23 crime lords down the East Coast. each one of them particularly grisly. These, is it 48 pages? These 48 pages that ran in the back of Maze were then collected into a graphic novel called Devil by the Deed. At that point, Kamiko asked me if I could continue this character on into a monthly series. Since the character died in the last segment, that was a real problem. I was struck by the idea then that the character could move on. Somebody could become obsessed, possessed, whatever, by the character, put on that mask and become the character. So I started looking around for new artists. I knew I didn't want to draw it. I had just finished 15 issues of Mage, which was 400 pages of fully colored artwork. I was feeling pretty burned out by that point. More than burned out, I was feeling that everything I was doing was right. And it's a real danger for an artist. I wanted more input. I wanted different viewpoints. I wanted to see through other people's eyes, as opposed to just my own. I found my next artist in the persons of a pair of young brothers from Portland, Oregon, named the Pander brothers, Arnold and Jakob Pander, a pair of Dutch brothers. This is their drawing of my character, Hunter Rose, the first Grendel. Again, to show you the effects of color. Their Grendel was a female. The step adopted granddaughter of the original Grendel was set in a Blade Runner-ish type future, and where our first Grendel was a crime lord assassin pseudo ninja, she was a real yuppie bitch from hell. And the Panders had a firm background in fashion illustration and graphic design, and so they brought this real unique film noir-ish type look to the series. This was their Grendel's arch nemesis, a kabuki dancer slash vampire named Tajiro. Now in comics, generally you work with a basic pencil layout stage, which it then is rendered in Indian ink so that it is easily reproducible, and then colored. This is the pencil stage of a panel featuring Tajiro. And then the finalized version. Copy of the ink, the colors added. Makes a real difference. Check that out again. For one thing, it's smaller.
One
Oh, okay.
thing from it.
Funny thing happened to me on the way to Shepherd College. Their Grendel sequence ran over 12 issues. And basically what I started looking at this as was a continuing series of contained stories. My purpose was to each time change the direction of the storyline, the presentation of the storyline, the perception of the visuals, as much as we could between segment to segment. They were a big switch for me. My Grendel dealt with werewolves and a little girl. They dealt with really leggy ladies. Again, the effects of color. Very dynamic and distorted these fellas are. Everything's larger than life. I mean, here all of a sudden her opponent has gained a good 3 or 4 feet on her. Again, color. Here again we see the effects of their film noir background. Look at that gun. You know, and these big, you know, most police stations have a clock that big sticking out of the wall. The next segment was 180 degrees in the other direction. and people either loved it or hated it. It was done by a fellow that ultimately became a good buddy of mine named Bernie Miro, a Canadian artist who first got in contact with when he sent me a hate letter that said, "Oh, I hate you. We started out at the same time, and I'm still in black and white, and you're getting color," and et cetera, and then I realized I was an asshole, and so I decided to write you and say hi. It was just a beautifully heartfelt letter that I immediately called him up and said, "Hey, you want a job?" These covers, he did 3 issues, and these covers were produced in coordination with a painter, like another Canadian painter named Ken Stacy. Bernie designed them, and then Ken did paintings, and he really used a lot of collage in his paintings. The wallpaper here is actual wallpaper pasted onto the painting. This mask is an actual hunk of cloth stuck on. You can actually see the drop shadow from the needle he glued on. This was the beginning of our real wild experimentation with covers. The second cover from that same series, the branch, is an actual branch just laid across the painting. What Bernie brought to the series was paranoia and dementia. Bernie's an incredible graphic artist. This is a point wherein the character that is becoming Grendel begins to perceive Grendel as an actual demonic force outside of himself, trying to possess him. And this is the point in the storyline wherein both the character and the force realize that the other is aware of each other's presence. Bernie's storytelling is very large and dynamic. I wanted to write this in 3 different points of view. One from the main character's point of view, one in an actual third-person narrative, and one from our demonic force's point of view. Bernie's the one who came up with this idea to have this burning underglow to every page and the demon's commentary stripped in white colors. Here, our main character is really losing his nut and has decided to track down the police officer that's been harassing him. This will just give you an example of the cinematics of Bernie's storytelling. Does he get him? Gotta buy the book. And as with all these, as I said, we're really trying to pursue the European tradition of serializing first, collecting into a novelized version later. This is the collected version of the 3 issues I did with Bernie. We called the story "The Devil Inside." I know I don't like in excess. Bernie, unfortunately, has proven to be not a very commercial talent as of yet, although his star is rising gradually, and so we decided it was a better idea for me to do the cover for commercial reasons for this one. So this is my cover of those 3 issues. Immediately following that, I decided I was going to try my hand at 4 issues. In these, I really tried to duplicate the feel of the old pulp magazines, the old detective fiction from the 40s and 50s. It was a 4-issue run. I divided those into 2 two-part stories. The first one trying more to duplicate the pulp feel from the 40s, and the second 2 trying to duplicate the pulp feel from the 50s, which was much more dark and psychological, as we see here. There were various similarities that ran between every issue. Between the 2 stories. For instance, on the back cover, the first segment of each one, we see Grendel's face observing the small lives of the pathetic creatures around him. And then on the back covers, we see his hand taking a part in what's going on. This piece is over in the show, actually. There's a problem, too, with some of the specifics, the mechanics of working with publishers. Somewhere in transition, a nail got left off the painting and never got replaced. It's still missing. You'll notice over in the gallery. With this pulp feel, if you've ever seen pulp magazines, they were done in, the copy was printed in columns, and they were very tight, very full. You always felt like you got a lot for your money. This storyline involved a detective character gradually uncovering a mystery. So I decided to go with this very metronomic layout of 25 panels a page. So step by step, you learn about the mystery even as the detective learns about the mystery. Try to go with a very limited color sense to give the pulp feel, and also to enhance the European flavor. Europeans tend to, in their comics, use an incredibly limited color sense. Immediately following that, we had 4 issues with some really expressive covers by another young Canadian artist. I lived in Canada for a while, that's why. All this nepotism to Canadians goes on. This fellow was quite an unusual collage artist. I didn't get a shot of the back cover here, but there was, oh, so much stuff pasted on the back. A giant wooden box. He had a small duplicate of the globe. He had a hunk of brick hanging over the globe precariously. And best of all was one of these little tiny kitty magnifying glasses. If you got up and looked at it, underneath, very tiny, with a pin, he had scratched the Grendel mask. So something you would only see if you got to interact with the original. So some little extras I really love. Again, one of his really expressive, really expressive abstract covers. I actually received this one as a wedding gift. Many happy years together. In the following sequence, after that, we started on a 10-issue run. That was a really out there storyline. It was set in the future wherein the world was entering a second dark age. The Catholic Church had reattained the power it had during the Middle Ages, and everything was incredibly despotic. And the Vatican was now located in Denver. And on the covers, on the back of each cover, we had a panoramic little illustration like this. And these illustrations were rendered incredibly small, 4 by 6 inches, I think each of the originals were. And then each cover featured a gigantic detail of the smaller illustration. And in each of these, we tried to show, we tried to depict in the detail the character, either the character's technology or his weaponry. In this case, this character is the Pope, and he also happens to be a vampire. And so his weaponry were his eyes and his teeth. The segment following is a real crucial segment for the development of this Grendel storyline. Again, turning 180 degrees in a different direction for story presentation. We wanted to go with an incredibly documentary feel. The feel that this was an incredibly historical event. Basically involves this character's gradual conquering of the world. He becomes known as the Grendel Khan. Khan spelled K-H-A-N, as in Genghis Khan. Storyline-wise, this was going to be the first Grendel to die a peaceful death, and he would spawn a huge legacy of Grendels, many, many to come. Therefore, we decided to break every issue in 2. The first half would be this incredibly tight, typesetting, documentary feel. Second half would be more organic, dealing with the vampires. This is a vampire entertaining a Japanese dignitary, and they're toasting. And he says to us, the guy says, it's animal blood, it clots fast. You have to drink it fast. There's an upcoming cover to Grendel. Again, turning 180 degrees in the other direction. After the tightly packed feel of the last issues, these issues will, for 10 issues, be practically wordless. The key with this series is I'm trying to bridge that evasive gap between experimentation and entertainment. I think we've done it pretty successfully so far. And I also think we're very successful in the fact that nobody knows what to expect next out of this series. You don't come to this series knowing what you're going to pick up. You come looking for an adventure. From Grendel, we have a new series called Grendel Tales starting. And this is really an opportunity for me to step back from the series. After 50 issues of writing this, where everybody dies, started to get a little depressed. And And plus, I knew I didn't want to do this forever. Grendel Tales will be a situation where other people can come in and write and draw and do their own versions of Grendel without messing up the continuity whatsoever. It'll enable me to step back, just act as creative director on the book. And we're already booked for the first 16 issues of this, and as with the last series, every segment changes dramatically. You won't know what to expect, and really are some of the top names in the field working on it. This was another little thing we did that we're going to continue further. Experimented black, white, and red, really limiting our color sense to only using one color, and using it as a story element, not as a small bit of representational color. In this case, the one character, Grendel, Grendel's copy is depicted in red balloons. Here in the red scene takes place elsewhere. We're jumping back and forth from scene to scene. And again, his copy is depicted on a field of red. Again, red is a story element. Now, the latest development with Grendel, of course, is the fact that we've just recently worked a deal to do a company crossover wherein Grendel will meet Batman, and who hasn't heard of that boy? This has been a long time coming. Negotiations for it took over 2 years, and it's a historical first because it's the first time ever that one of the large companies has tried to work with one of the smaller independent companies. Normally they just try to stamp us out. But I think this shows a changing attitude in comics. It used to be the big companies would think that there was no market for independently produced comics, comics with a cutting edge, comics written for adults. This shows that they're aware that there's a market, that they're aware that they can make some money off this market. It's good for us because it very much resembles the situations you see in the recording industry, wherein, let's say, EMI or Capitol Records, one of the big companies, will pick up a smaller label like Chrysalis and distribute them. EMI gets the benefit then of letting these more brash creators do what they want without answering for them directly. And the smaller companies get the advantage of working with the larger companies, vast financial resources and greater distribution capacities. This is Gotham City. Story involves Hunter Rose, the first Grendel that we saw, the assassin crime lord Grendel. This is a scene from the Gotham City Men's Club wherein Hunter Rose and Bruce Wayne just so happen to be sitting next to each other, unbeknownst to each other. And their initial sequence goes, "Excuse me." "Yes." "You seem to have gotten my red one, and I have your ginger ale." "Sorry." "Nice club this, you a member?" "7 generations." "No, I'm a writer from out of town and I love a good club." "So I see, but you must excuse me now. I'm here for a meeting and I'm already late." "Yes, I'm here for one as well. Sorry, but I didn't catch your name." "Wayne, Bruce Wayne, and you are?" Hunter Rose. These characters are very similar, so the entire storyline will deal with their comparisons and contrasts. The big difference is one's a good guy, one's a bad guy. They're both very urbane, they both dress in black. When it came time to actually write the two characters, though, I found that they were so grandiose that I couldn't get any humanity out of them. And I was forced to come up with two female leads that the story would be told from their point of view. They just so happen to be roommates. One of them's attracted to Hunter Rose and one of them's attracted to Bruce Wayne. These are just some particularly graphic panels from the series. Batman makes his first entry into the scene. Very black story. Lots of blacks on the page. Lots of texture. And Grendel makes his first appearance in the scene. Tense moment. This is the first actual face-to-face confrontation that happens in the second issue. I happen to find great photo reference for a very Gothic museum of natural history in France. And thought, oh, I can't let this go. Just some other projects I'm working on. This is a series called The Jam, done by my friend Bernie, who did those 3 issues of Grendel. Lately I've been trying to do a lot of this, do covers for smaller press books, trying to support them and give them the same breaks that I felt I had in the early days. This will be a series of 6 covers, and the point here is that the main character's emblem on his chest, this orange triangle, will revolve over the 6 issues, so to eventually make a complete circle and point straight back down on number 6. Another cover produced for a comic produced out of Kentucky, actually, called Go Man. And then this is the series I've been doing covers for recently. It's a Japanese series. It's incredibly popular in Japan, and it's been brought to America and translated. And they've been in the habit of getting popular American artists to do the covers to attract American audiences. Set in feudal Japan and basically involves the flight of this father and his young child from the forces of evil who are trying to crush them. And for my series of 12 covers, the effect I've been going for is very much to include nature in the piece, to give the feeling that these two are alone against the world. Now when you go over to the gallery, in addition to the originals from these covers that I have displayed, I also have the reproduced covers. So you really get a chance to see how much you lose when you go to print, and how much effect an art director's decisions as to what color the copy is on the cover, etc., will make on the final piece. This was the only one that didn't involve nature, and the reason was the main characters don't appear at all until the very last 5 pages, and they show up and kill somebody and leave. And it mainly involved this geisha who was leading a life of dishonor, didn't want to be a prostitute, etc., etc. My first initial cover sketch had the woman being grappled from behind by a customer whose head was buried in her neck, and I could tell it was just too much sex for any publisher in Illinois. And they came up with a very good argument, though, that to American audiences, any Japanese top knot looks like another, and so it might be misconstrued that it was the main character assaulting this woman. So there was another scene where they suggested, well, can't we just have the main character with like his sword up in the air? I was pretty adamant that I didn't want to do that for this. There was another scene where a customer, after he's done with her, contemptuously tosses her feet across her body. So I painted her and I made the coins and pasted them on the actual painting themselves. And believe it or not, the painting came back, too much nipple, we need one more coin. That's this little bugger right here. Now in closing, I'd just like to show you, I tried to show a little bit of what is happening in the world of adult comics. Now I'd like to show you 2 particular artists that I find personally extremely inspiring. This is an Italian artist named Lorenzo Matodi. This is his first piece translated into English, and it was really phenomenal. It's a graphic novel called Fires. It works in pastel with an incredibly exaggerated style. The story involves a naval ship that's sent to a Pacific South Sea island to see if it's eligible for civilization. And the ship, as you can see, renders as this cubistic nightmare, seemingly floating on a sea of oil. Very inspired by the German Expressionist movement. The island itself, then, is rendered in splashes of absolute pure color. It contrasts completely to the ship and its existence. Finally, one of the members of the crew becomes so possessed by the spirits of nature on the island that he turns against the ship. Really can't stress enough how unique this fellow's work is. Bernie, my friend Bernie, describes it as seeing Jack Kirby's work for the first time. Not that you would ever confuse the two, but they each have their own extremely specific visual language that they bring to this medium. My other personal favorite is a fellow named Hugo Pratt. He's Italian as well. Born in Venice, this fellow is a real globe hopper. He's traveled all around the world, and his character is another autobiographical character. This fellow looks like the artist. Guy named Cordo Maltese. His stories are historical adventure. Take place during World War I for the most part. Cordo Maltese is a freebooting soldier of fortune. Happens to run into Lawrence of Arabia, Jack London. Amazing amount of realistic characters from that time period. And they're all tremendously well researched. You really feel transported in these stories. Marvelous artist. Well, what really makes it is his sense of cinematics. This is from a tale called Tango. And notice we never see a full figure, and yet we see two figures dancing. In addition to his cinematic skill, he's also just a wonderfully delicate artist. And that's it for the slides. Now I guess I'd just like to open this up for questions and answers. Everybody here seems to be a bit of a comic reader, so I'm sure there's a question or two. Yeah.
Was the original Grendel from the Beowulf story, was he another, like another someone possessed, or was he the original?
He's the original. Ultimately, we're going to go so far. We keep going farther in the future with this. We'll get so far in the future, we'll hit the past. And it'll probably be when I come back to draw the series again next, it'll be to tell the story of the original Grendel.
Would that make the original, like, Beowulf, would he be, like, combined, would that be like combining, like, say, the Pendragon from Mage? Would he be like the original Pendragon fighting?
It's funny because people ask me about similarities between the two series, and they are so... It's such a dichotomy in myself. I never think of the two as interrelating whatsoever. No, he's more like Arjun, like Tajiro, the supernatural opponent that spurs on this aggression, and that's a continual necessity for the force to manifest itself, a person per se. Yeah, you have one.
Yeah, in Mage you used elements of Celtic mythology.
Mm-hmm.
Did you research that?
No, I just knew it from the womb. No, yeah, I did a lot of it. I didn't. Lately, I've been doing a lot more study into mythology. Have you read any Joseph Campbell? I've been reading a lot of Joseph Campbell, and I hadn't read any of him. I finished Mage, and I read The Hero with 1,000 Faces. And reading the first segment of it, it's like reading the plot synopsis of Mage. I just thought, man, I really clued into something here that was innate. And
yeah.
the specifics of the Celtic stuff, though, yeah, I certainly had to research it. I don't speak ancient Gaelic or anything, so yeah. What?
Well, it's the elements used are more from Irish mythology. But there was a book that I read by a guy named Loomis or something or other who traced the origins of Celtic mythology and Arthurian romance anyway, and he traced it all back to Irish stuff that had passed over into England.
Yeah, yeah.
And so,
Well, if you read much Campbell, you realize that it's all one big story. They're all interrelated, and they're all exactly the same story.
Right. And it seemed to me that, you had the sticks, and I thought, oh, there you go. He's just going, one chapter at a time through Campbell, and I'm amazed to hear that you read Campbell after.
Yeah. Yeah. The second one it'll involve Arthurian stuff, but it won't be, it'll be more an exploration of the second stage of the hero journey, more than the next segment of the Arthurian romances. With Mage 1, I kind of explored what I thought are the most powerful parts of the Arthurian cycle.
Well, I was impressed that you stayed away from the
The triangle, the specifics of...
Anyway.
She doesn't know.
Camelot 3000.
She looks at it like, you're on your own, pal.
Camelot 3000, like I contrasted it with Camelot 3000, and Camelot 3000 just, or whatever number it was, just dwelled on all the stereotypes.
Right, exactly. Well, funny you should mention that because I had started Mage, or revamped the Arthurian Legends, when I was much younger, and I still have the 2 pages I produced, and boy, will nobody ever see them, let me tell you. And then I read that DC was going to do Camelot 3000, and I thought, oh man, that's my idea, there it goes, you know.
Well, that's what I do.
So it came out, and I thought, yuck, this is awful. I can do this, I can take it, and do with myths what they should be done with, how they should be utilized, which is bringing them and repainting them for our time. Not taking the stereotypes and just plopping King Arthur down in a Superman suit. Yeah, right. Ray guns and aliens as opposed to Saxons. Yeah, you have a question.
Yeah, how do you self-discipline yourself when you have an assignment or an objective to get to? What kind of system do you use?
Rent. Well, it was much. I'm married now, and your life gets much more regulated during that thing. My wife's a school teacher, so we're up before the sun, and I have to work by 6:30, and then I know she gets home at 4, so I know that's my work period per se.
So you keep creativity flowing.
Yeah.
What do you do if it's not flowing? Or is it always flowing?
No, it's not always flowing. Boy, how do you pound it out of your head? Sometimes you just have to stop trying to pound it out of your head. There's times when the blocks are there and you can batter them down and call forth what you need. But sometimes you just have to divorce the world. You just gotta shut it off, run outside, get a drink. Really just forget what you're trying to do, and then stuff will come to you. My father-in-law, when he first met me, said, oh, you're an artist, huh? You're not afraid you're ever going to run out of ideas, are you? And no, you can't run out of ideas. As long as you're living, there's always a new idea. There's always a new experience to relate with to others, and that's where they come from. It's like, where do you get your ideas? You got a Kmart catalog? Yeah.
When you were talking about the artistry before, what do you think is most important for a writer and aspiring to become a writer for us? What is more?
What's important for a writer? Get yourself an artist. That's what's important. Because I don't know what you're trying to write, so I really can't advise you on what you should try and stress. But so far as I can advise you on the mechanics of getting yourself published, and I know that publishers get a lot of written submissions in. First ones they look at are those that are accompanied by visuals. So get yourself an artist, one that you feel you can work with. If there's any stress there whatsoever, find another one, or try to find another one. That doesn't very specifically answer your question. Do you want to ask another one maybe? That.
I meant specifically, what if somebody were to submit something to you for the Grendels? I mean, you're overseeing them.
Mm-hmm.
What would catch your eye about the writing? What would get your attention the most? Would it be the basic idea, or would it be the presentation, or the idea of how well they tell the story, even if they have to change it a little bit?
All that. All that. You know what you're talking about. On to the next. I don't know. I can't really say. It's such a temporal thing.
When you sit in front of something and you go, this is a good piece of work, or this isn't a good.
It's all personal. It's all personal preference. And I'm not static. You know, next week I might think the thing I rejected last week is great. And sometimes I get artwork in from people and I think, geez, I hired these people? You know? So I can't really tell what I'm looking for. I would suggest, if you're at all interested in submitting some Grim Tales, write to Kamiko. Write to Grendel's Lair, actually. That'll get to me maybe quicker. And ask for a copy of the Grendel Tales Bible. I just wrote a 6-page outline that stresses what you should and shouldn't be doing with it. But so far as presentation, that's such an individual thing. I don't present my comics anywhere anywhere at all like Gavin Wilson presents his comics, and yet I'm successful in what I do, he's successful in what he does. You just have to be pure to what you're trying to do. Figure out what you're trying to do, figure out what's gonna communicate that the best. Get an artist. Yeah.
When you get, how should they write it? I mean, should it be in like a book form? Like, you know, you write that the person does this.
400 or 500 pages will do.
But
No, 5 to 10 pages of like plot synopsis, and the more visuals the better. You know, I mean, it doesn't take any time for me to look through things. Reading things takes time, so that's why I need 5 to 10 pages. Plot synopsis and character descriptions. That's all. And how many issues you think you deserve. Yeah, way up there.
You're talking about how long it takes you to draw each frame. How long does it take you to complete the comic book from start to finish?
Oh boy. Depends on how you're talking. You're talking in a typically in comics you work in a production line situation. You have a writer, a penciler, i.e. a designer, an inker, a colorist, a letterer. With that sort of situation, it's possible to produce comics 1 a month. Doing entirely the thing yourself takes much longer. With Mage, where I was doing almost everything myself short of the lettering, we can only do it every 2 months. So completed page in color, maybe 1 page every 2 days. Yeah.
Who influenced you the most in comics as an artist?
God, who didn't influence me? I was a comics reader as a kid, and had pretty much given up on the idea of ever pursuing it as a career, mainly due to the lack of acceptance I was seeing for the medium. At that point I was going to JMU, and they really didn't like comics down there. And then I transferred to Philadelphia Art College, and therein I met the guys that ultimately formed Kamiko. And they showed me Frank Miller, and that really revitalized my interest that something different could be done. Because I was at a stage then where what I needed was storytelling excitement to interest me again. I mean, I had seen a lot of the undergrounds, but at that point I wasn't really interested in social commentary, political commentary, etc. Miller showed me that just the art and design alone could do wonderful, interesting things, where I thought that those things were really stilted and pounded down by the